Hi folks, thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of guns. So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com, that's gunsetc.com, and if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Welcome back, April 23rd, 2020. I should like to try an experiment and, without further comment, read a few things most once counted, or perhaps someday in the near future will again, as classics. In 1939, C.S. Lewis gave a famous sermon, Learning in Wartime it was called. Here's part of what he said. He said, "The war creates no absolutely new situation. It simply aggravates the permanent human situation so that we can no longer ignore it. Human life has always been lived on the edge of a precipice. Human culture has always had to exist under the shadow of something infinitely more important than itself. If men had postponed the search for knowledge and beauty until they were secure with the search, it would never have begun. We are mistaken when we compare war with normal life. Life has never been normal. Even those periods which we think most tranquil, like the 19th century, turn out, on closer inspection, to be full of cries, alarms, difficulties, and emergencies. Plausible reasons have never been lacking for putting off all merely cultural activities until some imminent danger has been averted or some crying injustice put right. But humanity long ago chose to neglect those plausible reasons. They wanted knowledge and beauty now and would not wait for the suitable moment that never came. Periclean Athens leaves us not only the Parthenon, but significantly the funeral oration. The insects have chosen a different line. They have sought first the material welfare and security of their hive, and presumable they have their reward. Men are different. They propound mathematical theorems in beleaguered cities, conduct metaphysical arguments in condemned cells, make jokes on scaffold, discuss the last new poem while advancing to the walls of Quebec, and comb their hair at Thermopylae. This is not panache. It is our nature." About 10 years later, he wrote his now famously revived essay, How to Live with the Atomic Bomb, where he said, "In one way we think a great deal too much about the atomic bomb. How are we to live in an atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you are already living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all who you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics, but we have that still. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and which death itself was not a chance at all but a certainty. This is the first point to be made, and the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things, praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds. In his 1950 speech, accepting the Nobel Prize, William Faulkner spoke thusly, "Our tragedy today is a general and universal physical fear, so long sustained by now that we can even bear it. There are no longer problems of the spirit. There is only the question, when will I blow up? He must learn them again. He must teach himself that the basest of all things is to be afraid, and teaching himself that, forget it forever, leaving no room in his workshop for anything but the old verities and truths of the heart, the old universal truths, lacking which any story is ephemeral and doomed. Love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Until he does so, he labors under a curse. I refuse to accept this. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. The poet's, the writer's duty is to write about these things. It is his privilege to help man endure by lifting his heart, by reminding him of the courage and honor and hope and pride and compassion and pity and sacrifice which have been the glory of his past. The poet's voice need not merely be the record of man. It can be one of the props, the pillars, to help him endure and prevail. You heard me mention the short story Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut a couple days ago. It was first published in 1961. I'd like to read an excerpt from the beginning. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution and the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the Handicapper General people took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. It was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicapped radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned to the government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. A buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic like bandits from a burglar alarm. That was a real pretty dance, that dance they just did, said Hazel. Huh? Said George. That dance, it was nice, said Hazel. Yes, said George. He tried to think a little bit about the ballerinas. They weren't really very good, no better than anybody else would have been anyway. They were burdened, after all, with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked so that no one seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face would feel like something that the cat dragged in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas. Fast forward to 1983, when President Reagan said this in his Evil Empire speech, quote, "A number of years ago, I heard a young father, a very prominent young man in the entertainment world, addressing a tremendous gathering in California. It's during the time of the Cold War, and communism and our own way of life were very much on people's minds. And he was speaking to that subject. And he suddenly, though, I heard him say, 'I love my little girls more than anything.' And I said to myself, 'Oh no, don't say it.' But I had underestimated this man, for he went on to say, 'I would rather see my little girls die now, still believing in God, than have them grow up under communism and one day die no longer believing in God.' There were thousands of young people in that audience. They came to their feet with shouts of joy. They had instantly recognized the profound truth in what he said with regard to the physical and the soul and what was truly important. What was truly important. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.